Um, Thank you for joining me. I've had some requests about talking about Rahu and Ketu. I think this might go over maybe more than one video, so I thought I'd just start with discussing some things to do with Rahu. So clearly, we've all been reincarnated because of Rahu, and in Vedic astrology, Rahu rules is co-ruler of Aquarius, which is the natural 11th house of the zodiac, and it's a very kind of forward-looking, futuristic sign, if you like, and it's very much the pioneer as well. It supports technology, space, and things of that nature, really. So we anywhere the nodes are, whether it's Rahu or Ketu, they do create a little bit of enigma to do with that house because obviously, first of all, Rahu Ketu are one entity and they've just literally been severed. And these are where the eclipses also occur. So there's always like a little bit of mystery, a little bit of something that you can't put your finger on about these shadowy planets. Ketu co-rules Scorpio, so again it's everything that we know and we kind of bring in from the previous life. So that makes both Scorpio and Aquarius very much the signs that are karmic in our lives and in the zodiac. So any planets that falls into those two signs, there are indications and things going on with that planet that we have to overcome. And whereas Rahu is very much about like obviously when we're first born, we know things to do with Ketu. We bring in those in. It's no coincidence that a child can, at the age of 3, sit behind a piano and start playing it like a professional. They bring those talents in from previous lives, and wherever we are, Rahu sits here. I don't want to offend anyone, but literally the only way you can say it is just be fake anywhere that Rahu sits, because we don't really have any knowledge of it, and we really have to work in order to actually feel fulfilled in life. We need to do things to do where Rahu is. So we can all tend to do too much of the Ketu stuff to begin with, but as we kind of get to know ourselves, mature, and delve into the world out there, we become okay about Rahu things. And actually, when we start doing them, we do feel better about life, and that brings about a little bit of balance between the axes where these two are. So wherever Rahu is, I don't actually take Rahu's 7th or Ketu's 7th aspect. To me, they're one entity, and they both do actually aspect 5th or 9th houses from them, but they don't need to aspect where they are sitting each of them. Like Rahu doesn't actually aspect 7 houses, and Ketu doesn't aspect 7 houses. One shadow planet. So Rahu is bodiless, so it's just the head. So it's always, and because the face is all where our senses are, whatever it sees it wants, is planet of desire, want. And I don't know if you've ever seen Casper. It's like 1980s, 90s film. It's brilliant. Casper obviously being the ghost, and because obviously when you don't have a body, you just seeing things through experiences of your eyes, your senses in your head, but you're not really kind of digesting everything, your environment very well. So everything is just going right through you, so you just like and there's a scene in there where all the ghosts are in the kitchen, and they are just eating, and all this food is pouring out of them because they obviously haven't got a digestive system, so it just goes through them. So that's what Rahu is like. Rahu wants, it's like almost like when you go shopping and you see a dress or a top, or for the gents, if say for example you see the latest camera, the moment you get it and get it home, you're kind of looking for the next thing that you want, you know. So you just want to put it in your wardrobe. You don't necessarily, you just want it in your possession rather than the possession of the shop. And normally things to do with Rahu are just very much like, oh, you know, momentarily I want this now, and then it will be something else pretty soon after. And Ketu is pretty much detached anyway, because he has had the experiences, and he's just literally trying to cut away wherever he's sitting, is trying to get you to just walk away from the that house, you know. It's detached from the house that he's sitting in. And Rahu, as much as he sees and he can't digest, Ketu is the opposite. So he can't see, and therefore you know, it's just contemplating too much, you know, trying to digest something, but it's actually not entered his mouth, so it's non-existent. So I would definitely say also, you know, if you hear the myth about Rahu Ketu, Rahu, the reason why Rahu is not considered so auspicious in Vedic astrology is because it kind of lies to the gods that it is a god, to get the nectar of immortality, and so therefore it's very much to do with thieves, liars, scammers, trollers, you know, people who are leading very unorthodox lives, really. So these are the things to do with Rahu. Ketu can be the same as well, but literally wherever Ketu is like a it's like Mars, so it kind of pierces wherever it is. It's just like there's lack of satisfaction, a bit of pain to go with whatever house it's sitting in. So, but obviously in today's world we need a little bit of we lead very much a life of Rahu anyway, because it's very much to do with social media. So it's like something that doesn't really exist. Like, people sometimes think that, like, because they know so much about a celebrity, they're friends with that celebrity, but they don't really know that celebrity. So it's illusion. That's probably the perfect way to describe Rahu. It's complete illusion. That's why it rules film and the whole film industry, because it's just like you go in there, you go to the cinema, or you watch a film on Netflix because you want to kind of lose yourself. It's an imaginary world. So it's mystery, illusion. It's kind of to do with charisma. Somebody who's got Rahu in certain placements will be very charismatic. You remember that we all fake where Rahu is. So we're all pretending that where Rahu is, we know things about it. And I will come and tell you all about the houses soon. But just generally, yeah, we're faking it. We're just pretending that we know what's going on with that. But actually, we have no experience of it, so we're faking it. And so there's an enigma attached to it, a bit of taboo as well, because obviously, as I said, you know, in the olden days, anything to do with foreign, obviously it rules anything foreign, anything unusual. And in the olden days, even if you were to kind of move away like 50 miles from where you lived in the olden days, you kind of become like a bit of an outcast, almost as though you were not able to work within your sort of community, and you've had to move away. So it wasn't considered to be such an auspicious thing. But obviously things are different now. We live in a different world, and particularly living in today's world, or in the West particularly, you definitely need to have a bit of Rahu in order to just get through life, really. So it, as I said, you know, it's the unknown. It's what we don't know. There's an enigma attached to it. It rules technology, aliens. It's all to do with the fog. So you can't really see what's really going on. It's unclear. It's very desire-based, very ambitious. It's also very creative. It rules addictions. Any form of addictions is something to do with Rahu. And all addictions, drinking, smoking, drugs, any form, sex addiction, gambling, you name it. And also it's over the top energy as well. So it's like sometimes, you know, particularly if somebody has got Rahu in a really bad placement, that it could just be very, very odd. So always looking for the next thing. It's never satisfied with what you have, the status quo. It's always got to go for the next one. So this is very telling if Rahu is with your 7th lord or Venus, always looking for the next thing. You know, if you're kind of like with money, you know, if anything that sits on you, always wanting the next thing. It's slightly, so you could say in the American terminology would be phony. It is faking it. It's false. It's not real. It's lies. It's people who lead you, you know, people who lead you astray will be like ruled by Rahu. Bad company is Rahu. Double life, leading 2 separate lives. You know, you hear people who are married, they got a family and they got another family somewhere else, or, you know, that's another Rahu issue. And it's false identity. It's all this sort of people who've got different types of passports, you know, and false identification. It's plastic surgery because you're faking what you look like, or all these fillers and all that kind of stuff. You know, you could find out if Rahu travels into your first house, you could actually then suddenly want to change your image. So you might start having fillers and Botox or grow a beard, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, you just kind of want to change and be different. It's kind of like, you know, you could, you know, when we were saying, like, for example, earlier, so they could have double identity. It could be very much to do with Harvey Weinstein and also Bill Cosby of this world, where they had this image of like clean image and helping people in the industry, a family man like Bill Cosby. And actually behind the scenes, they were up to very unusual stuff, very, very disgraceful things, really. So, yeah, it's very, very odd. It can kind of, obviously it's all to do with the futuristic things as well. So, yeah. And then we have Ketu. Ketu is all about dissatisfaction, it's disconnection, it's like kind of, Ketu is almost like regret, guilt, those kind of feelings. It's always in the past. It's always got like, it's almost, you know, retrograde planets can be a little bit like that. So if you had a retrograde planet and it's sitting with Ketu, then you got double the energy, but it's always reflecting back. Oh, what did I do? What went wrong? You know, and they say something and they're just worrying about it for a really long time, kind of thing. They can't let go. They can't clear the slate and just move forward. Holding on to all kind of negative energy and living on memories, really. So they could reflect too much on things that are no longer serving them, really. So that would be things to do with Ketu. So I just did a few notes actually. So I think I'll kind of start on that. So basically, when you have we all have obviously Rahu sitting somewhere and Ketu sitting somewhere in our chart, and they will always be in the opposite axis. But remember that in transits we can get them kind of returning as well. You know, going into different houses as well. And they take roughly about 18 and a half years to go around the zodiac, and they always travel retrograde. They always go backwards. And I use mean notes, not true notes, because it kind of calculates average where they are. I just find, for me, it just gives me better result. It's completely up to you what you use. And if you want to, you know, I'm not very, you know, into sort of like very astronomical things. I just know what works for me. So if you want to know more about it, you can actually Google that. So Okay, so I'm just going to do the axes just very quickly, and I will just, come to that. So this what I'm telling you now is your placements in your chart, but you should always look at it as well. If, say, for example, if I'm saying Rahu in the first house, because the natural zodiac starts with Aries, it could kind of be Rahu in Aries as well. So you want to just have a look at that, really. So Rahu in the first house will have a confusion about their identity because they've lived so much through relationships in previous lives. They really have an issue about being themselves, being authentic to other people or to themselves. So they're just really literally, they're just learning about themselves in this lifetime. So there's a self-identity issues. So they could latch on to somebody that they like, and they just think for a while they might copy that person, and then they might see somebody else and copy the other person. So they're kind of trying to find themselves through that. And you should never have any judgment on this. We all have Rahu somewhere, and we will have it we could all end up having it in the first house at some point. So they would also want to change their image a little bit, and they might actually be quite different as well. So they might have different hairstyles to, so it could be a man who's got long hair, or it could be a woman who got short hair. It could be somebody who changes their hair color often. They might wear very psychedelic clothing, very colorful, and there'd be something usual about them. They try to be too much like this or like that, if you like, that kind of thing. So they try to learn about who they are, to just like not just have realize what image they want to portray to the world, but also what personality they want to be. So they might take on somebody else's personality as well, and just learn through these things until the faking stops and they learn who they are. So, and also sometimes when really good planets, like say Jupiter, really calms down Rahu as well, when you have that come into in conjunction. So at the moment, obviously, in the skies we have Jupiter is actually in Aquarius. So if that Jupiter is on your Rahu, it's actually calming down Rahu, is actually giving it a bit of wisdom, making it happier, more optimistic. But generally speaking, I actually find Rahu is quite an optimistic planet. It's not like Rahu is, to me, is like the face they portray to the world is happy and enthusiastic, learning. It's like a kid who wants to learn, whereas Ketu can be a little bit like somber, it's reflective, so it's very different. So yeah, so it's and they want to be noticed. When you have Rahu in the first house, they probably will do things which will be quite unorthodox in order for people to see them, to notice them. And this could also happen, obviously, in the first house, or if you're sitting in Aries, as I said, or if you're sitting with your ascendant Lord as well. And then we have, if at the same time, obviously, if you have Ketu in your first house, you will have that disconnection with self, and you have you kind of like been too involved in a previous life about yourself and self-identity, and now you're very much like wanting to connect with other people, but it will be a bit awkward with you to begin with, because what is about self, and now you're being invited in this lifetime to experience relationships, and you could just be too much into, at the beginning you'll be too much into yourself. As time goes by, you realize that you need to do Rahu things, so you'll be into your 7th house. And because again, that's alien to you, so you might make some mistakes in relationships and everything until things start to just flow a bit better. It's so interesting, these things. I just find them so amazing. So if Rahu is in your 2nd house, then you could have food obsessions, or you could eat, because obviously, actually, just going to go back. If you have Rahu in the 1st house, it's very important when you wake up in the morning to keep looking at your feet and grounding yourself. Equally, if you have Ketu in the 1st house, make sure you look in the mirror as often as you can during the day. Every time you go to the bathroom, wash your hands, look at your face, Ladies, take a lipstick in with you. Just make sure you connect with yourself. So important. Yeah, so Ketu in the first house, very important to just connect with yourself as well, because that will give you the balance in life. So Rahu in the second house, as I was saying, is like it could give you so you're faking about self-value, so you don't really understand self-value, you don't understand family, you don't understand values kind of thing, so you're faking them a little bit to begin with until that house becomes into balance. And as you get older, you naturally just connect anyway. So and this also can give you, as I said, obsessions with food, drinking, substances, particularly if your second house is has got malefic influence, afflictions. And it can give you things like, bulimia as well, where you just like eating too much, or you just like obsession with money, obsession with like family and things like that, wanting to have that self-value, trying to grab it, so it'll be a little bit like that. And if Ketu is in your second house, then you can be anorexic. You could just like have no self-value and really struggle with those kind of things, struggle with family, connecting with family members, connecting with, don't really understand your value, money comes and, you work really hard for your money. You could just let it go very easily as well and have no money, have money issues. So it could give you those kind of issues as well. So very important to work on those sort of things. All of these things you can work on, so it's really good to then work on Venus, because Venus is the natural ruler of the second house. So by working on Venus, you actually get your self-value up, your morals, your values. Money will come in as well, because Venus is a planet that rules money and choices, values, family. And then we have third house. So if your Rahu is in your third house, then there's an obsession with all things to do with third house. So third house, is natural third house, is Gemini. So Gemini is about union between two people, so it's sexual house. So it could be you're very curious about all things to do with third house, which is sex, friends, learning, skills, activities, travel, writing, all the arts, all self-expression, everything. So you don't know how to do it, and then afterwards, when you worked on it, you can start, you need to work on Mercury then, because Mercury rules self-expression. Obviously also is inviting you to be brave, and because third house, the karaka for that is Mars, so you want to work on things like bravery as well, to self-express yourself properly. And so people who have got a Rahu in third house, they could just be either very, very obsessive about social media or not at all. So they have to learn to get the balance right. Do I really need to be on that? Does it serve me? And friends as well. They're very, very sort of don't know how to make connections with people. So these are all very alien to them. So particularly if through siblings, they learn a little bit about being brave, because they have to fight for a toy, or they need to, they learn to self-express, mum, my brother hit me or something, it's kind of like a Mars obviously shows them how to be brave, and Mercury shows them how to, so by working on those planets, you can actually really help your Rahu in the third house. So again, you're faking all those things to do with third house. And when you have Ketu in the third house, clearly, you're kind of always falling out with friends and siblings, and you might have no connections with them. You might not be very good at connecting, or you might have very, very few friends, and you just stick to them because they know you and you know them, and you're just comfortable with that, really. So you don't really need to express yourself to many more people, and you'll be very kind of cut and dry about your communication. So it's like, see you at 6. There'd be no dressing up of anything like that. So again, if you work on Mercury, things will definitely, if you want to just balance that third house thing. And so they might just not be that interested in kind of third house things generally, learning, traveling, things like that. So, and So it's also like there's a restlessness going on, and they also obviously there are issues to do with intelligence as well, because third house also your intelligence. They could be faking, they could be like overly sort of studying to come across as though they're studious and well informed as well. So that could be some of the issues that's going on there. But there's definitely a bit of they want to succeed. You see, this is all about the effort, just like pushing themselves forward. Try really hard to be successful. So whereas like Ketu would not care less if they succeeded or not. So, but they need to have a little bit of ambition as well in order to balance that, you know. And when it's like Rahu is in the fourth house, again, it would be the same as Rahu being Cancer as well. So these, obviously, this is where you are. It's your emotional self. It's your fulfillment, internal fulfillment, your sensitivity, your receptivity, your feelings. You know, so these people can actually like be completely unaware of what feelings mean, and they could be a little bit faking it as well. You know, faking that they are not really. They could be like feeling a lot of emotions, but not really recognizing emotions. Healthy emotions, unhealthy emotions. So they're learning about emotions, feelings, connecting to people, all that kind of stuff. They learn about feeling secure, feeling emotional. You know, they could have unusual mom, unusual cars. Yeah, so there could be like issues to do with that. So they need to. This is what they're trying to learn about, really. So there's definitely there's faking the emotions before you learn about the emotions and slowly get to know that. And their relationship with their mum, they could have a really good relationship, but it's actually quite surface. It's not really, because they are all their relationships until a certain age, when they start working on it and become aware, they could be quite social butterflies. So they don't really know anyone. They got a lot of connections, but none of those connections are deep. Everything is very surface. And if Ketu is there, obviously there is a disconnection with mother, with feelings, with emotions. And this could also be because also it's homeland as well. They could leave their homeland, so they just end up working somewhere to do with work, or depending on your chart, and never go back to their homeland again, or they just go to visit, so they actually immigrate and go and live somewhere else in the world. And so this is Rahu in Cancer, and they just like learning about how to feel. And so when it's in the fifth house, there's they're learning about things to do with dating and romance and affection. So how does that work? How does dating go? So how do I become romantic? You know, they're just learning about it. They could be when they're dating, they could be over the top. So like they could actually kind of feel as though after one date they're in a relationship with somebody, so it could give you that delusion. Or it's obviously as house of intelligence as well, so they have to kind of, it's the relationship with the child can be very very surface, or the child could be an adopted child or partner's child from another relationship as well. And they're learning how to connect with youngsters, because it's obviously young people and students as well, which is fifth house. But they're learning about investments and making right choices about investment, intelligently working through that. And obviously if Ketu is there could be a disconnection with children, or either they don't have children, or they don't really have a close relationship with the children, or they have to really work at relationship with the children, relationship, romance in the relationship. All these things are there's a disconnection there. So, and when either of them are in the sixth house, they could be like there could be a kind of falseness about diseases. So it could be something like, for example, they could have unusual diseases, or they could be hypochondriacs, or they could be treating disease, health issues with unusual methods like kinesiology or Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, something like that, particularly if Ketu is there. And they could do unusual forms of exercise as well. So they're not necessarily, you know, they could be mountain climbing. Depends on the sign that this occurs in. And yeah, so they could be, you know, with Rahu and Ketu, both of them can actually see enemies, because obviously sixth house is enemies. They could just see an enemy at every corner. They're just like fighting these battles constantly that might not actually exist. So, but actually it's a good placement, because Rahu does well in the third house and the sixth as well, and Ketu does well in the sixth. Yeah, but constantly, so they could always like be constantly complaining about some sort of health issue as well. And with Ketu, they could bring debt issues in from previous lives. So they have debts that they have, karmic debts that they have to pay in this lifetime, whether they pay it in having enemies, you know, having debts, money debts, or, you know, diseases. That's something that they're bringing in. So it's quite good to deal with it and get it out of the way, really. So I'm all for that, working through that. But yeah, it could be kind of constantly complaining about this is poor me. There could be a little bit like that as well. I'm ill again, you know, kind of thing. Or yeah, so they just have to work through that, particularly Ketu, because Ketu can hold on to the bad energy, because that makes them ill again. And sixth house is all about digesting life and digesting food. So this is a house that you really got to work at your health. So through means of sort of Ayurveda, exercise, yoga, good sort of daily routine, being very sort of precise about things. And Ketu can do that, particularly because Ketu is very precise, so they can overcome those issues. And then we have seventh house. So when you have Rahu in the seventh house, they could be like faking it about relationships, because they don't really know how to be in a relationship. So they could literally just be pretending to be in a relationship, pretending to be fully in, but they're not really fully in. And they could be having affairs, all that kind of stuff, you know, leading this sort of unusuals. They could have several different partners, things like that. So, and Ketu could be quite disconnected to the seventh house. But, you know, both of them can work really well. Once you really work at it, you have to work on Venus in this case. That's Karaka of the seventh house, very important. And because it's a planet that's friendly with both of them, it does really, really well. When you have Rahu in the eighth house or Ketu in the eighth house, there could be addictions. And it could be any form of addictions, sexual addictions, spending, you know, any form, alcohol, anything like that. And because this is a very sort of deep waters, emotional sort of deep waters as well. It'd be kind of, it's dealing with those emotional issues, because they don't know how to sort of express all of that, and they're holding on to things. They just like more and more, and there will be a guilt as well, particularly if Ketu's there. Ketu will be like, might start sort of taking drugs and feel guilty, start spending. You know, it could just be like a vicious cycle of addictions happening. And with Rahu as well, it could be like both of them can give you phobias and psychiatric issues as well. And, you know, as I said, sexual issues, things like that. But they might actually make it bigger and graver than what it is as well, because obviously being Scorpio energy as well. So yeah, you really need to kind of work on letting go in that. So not to just like keep taking everything so deeply. And Rahu in the eighth house, particularly I think in the Navamsha, can give like complete dissatisfaction with sex. They just feel as though they want so much sex, but they just never satisfied. So they have to really work on that and actually realize that, you know, this is source of energy, life energy, and they just like wasting it constantly by being very sexually active and just exhausting themselves. So it's very important to just like respect that, you know, because Shukra is like the ruler of sex. You know, it's not about abuse of the body and body force. So yeah, you want to look after that. So Rahu in the ninth house or Sagittarius. So this will be Rahu doesn't do well because this is like a very respectful house, and it's all about your beliefs, it's religion, spirituality, it's your gurus, it's your father, natural, it's education, this far distance, travels and pilgrimages, and it's like house of luck from previous life. So Rahu can you have to really work at this, because it can make person, both Ketu or Rahu, fanatical, and they feel as though their truth is the only truth. So it's very, very important. Hopefully, if Jupiter is well placed, it will help it. But really need to work on Jupiter on this one, because Jupiter is the planet that can really curb and get both these two shadowy planets to work really well, give them boundaries, and make them kind of respect things as well. So it's very important that, because otherwise they could be very fundamental, and they'd be thinking my religion is the only way, my beliefs are the only way. So it's like, there could be sort of trouble on their path to enlightenment. So it could be issues with, they could attract false gurus, and be completely sucked in. There could be, these what they call them, these kind of cults where they just suck people in and they just pretend like, we've seen that quite a lot happening, and they just, some of them, like how Sharon Tate was killed by, this very odd cult, so you just got to be really aware of these things, because they might not actually know what they're actually doing, what they're getting into, because they are being following something that's charismatic rather than real. So it's like, and they can also be a little bit picky and choosy about, I want a little bit of this and a little bit of that with Rahu, so, and they just want to pick the religion as it suits them. So they do like a pick and mix of things that they want to do. So they're not fully invested as well. So there could be a little bit of fake in there. But obviously all of these things get better with time. And if your Rahu's got an aspect from Jupiter, or Jupiter's strong in your chart or in Navamsha, it'll be fine. But so Ketu can be seriously fundamentalist as well. So you have to watch that too. And then in the 10th house, Rahu can be kind of faking the job a little bit, because they got this massive charisma. So people will be taken in by the charisma that this person can really do these things. And actually it turns out this person didn't really know anything. We were taken in by them. And at work, they will be, again, very choosy about what they do. They're not very responsible. They can be like, choose this or choose that. But again, it's an Upachaya house, and Rahu always does well in Upachaya houses, 3rd, 6th, 10th and 11th. So, but it could be a little bit like faking it to begin with. But if it's a good placement, so it should be fine. And I'll come to that about good placements. Ketu can kind of, if it's in the 10th house, it could either be like, depending on the placement, if it's a good placement, it could be a really good mathematician, physician, physics, things like that. It could, or computer science and stuff, or it could be completely disconnected from work, thinking that I don't want to do any work. This is because they're too spiritual, and so not at all responsible about work, and that would be difficult for a woman if they got children with them, because they just start a job, stop a job, start a job. They could be, or if it's in good dignity, then it'll be fine. So 11th house. So 11th house, obviously, house of friendships, big groups, networks, things like that. So with Rahu, they will be faking, and they'll be having very, very, they'll be social butterflies. So they have all these connections, but they're not authentic with anyone. They just tell everybody whatever they want to hear, really. So that's where you've got to be very careful with poor dignity Rahu, really, until unless the person is aware and they work on it, is fine. But they will be faking all of these things, and they'll be like making the most of manipulation to actually gain what they want from their groups of friends, networks, etc., for their financial gain. Because they will be scheming, because that's another problem with Rahu. Rahu is quite manipulative. So it's quite selfish. So he wants what he wants, you know. So it's nice to know these things. And then we have 12th house. So Ketu does really well in the 12th house, the spiritual house. It's a house of letting go. So it does really well. And but obviously you've got to be careful as well, because this is also a house of imprisonment. And so there could be issues there. And also Rahu there, Rahu in the 12th house, because it's one of the houses of marriage. It can be quite disconnected, so you have to be careful with that. But both of them can actually take you abroad as well. But there could be, like with Rahu, you have to work in certain houses. It's not really a particularly good house for Rahu, because there could be bed hopping, you know, with Rahu there. So you just want to be aware of that. So it's not very authentic placement for Rahu. I think it's much better for Ketu to be there than it is for Rahu. And so it could be like secret bed pleasures for Rahu. You know, they just secret things. But so it's a secret house. You know, so Ketu also will be. So if I give you some of the indications of Rahu Ketu, because I'll talk about Rahu more, but Ketu can be invisible a little bit in the first house. So it could be uptight, could be controlling, can be impatient and complex personalities as well. You know, they just be like awkward for the sake of being awkward as well. And they be sensitive, but there will be a certain amount of sharpness to go with Ketu in the first house. You know, that impatience, because they're always like next. You know, they just so. They feel also there's shyness about them. They feel as though people don't notice them, because obviously it's headless if it's in the first house, and that can make things very unsettled, and they could very quickly give up on things. They just don't have the stamina to see things through, and they will be very rigid. You've got to see that Ketu does well in Scorpio and also in houses like Pisces and Sagittarius. It does well, although Sagittarius, I still think they've got to be careful. It does pretty well in Venus signs as well, but I think actually I'm just going to stick with Scorpio and Pisces. Those are the best places that it works on. I think even in Venus signs, you've got to be careful, really. So you just because although they're friends, you know, there could be Ketu, because it's so detached, it could kind of monetize things to do with females a little bit as well. So although they're really friendly planets, I still will be cautious with that. And Rahu does really well in obviously Aquarius, because he rules it, and Gemini and Virgo does really well as well. Rahu does work very well with Mercury and Venus, definitely, and it's worth knowing those things. So I'm just going to change my thing so I can give you more information about Ketu as well. So now if Ketu was, I have touched a little bit about Ketu in the second house, but there could be sort of broken relationships with the family as well. So, excuse me, I've just hurt my wrist and it's just, everything's so painful. So, so there could be like breakage in the family. There'd be food issues. There could be like probably more anorexic than bulimic, really. They could kind of have money and lose money, and there's like, you know, there's just such disconnection. So they could get like credit cards and run big bills and not be able to pay. So you've got to be really careful, you know, don't buy things on these sort of like, you know, buy now, pay later, or, you know, all these sort of, don't if you are with a Ketu person, just make sure that you have control of the money, because they could just disconnect and you end up, because they just don't respect the, they just so detached from the house there is in. So they can abuse money, they can abuse their body with substances, food, alcohol, stuff like that. So, so basically, as I said, you know, Ketu as well in the third house will be difficult with learning and all kind of communication, as I said earlier. Ketu people hold themselves back in life, really. That's my message to you, is just like, really work on it, because it really, you know, actually Venus really helps. Venus and Mercury, working on those two planets, really uplift Ketu. And Rahu obviously has got an ego issue, which is can be completely wrong. It can be confused and vague, and both of them can give phobias and addictions. And there's like both of them can also make you, like in the third house, you know, in the 11th house, you can actually be fooled by somebody, groups of friends, and they say to you, oh yeah, I knew about this new sort of like form of, you know, investment. So Rahu in the 5th house, Rahu in the 11th house, you know, and they could literally take you in, and yeah, you could actually be scammed by them. So be very careful about those things, knowing because you don't know what's right and wrong about that house until you start walking, and with caution. Yeah, until you find the right path, really. It's very important. Rahu, obviously, you know, you got to know that's Rahu is also an obsession with having more and more and more. So when it is like in Libra, you know, it will be kind of a sexual house. It's like more. Same as Rahu in Scorpio as well. So it's all with Venus as well. So it can be like too much about, you know, having obsessive relationship as well. When it is Rahu with the Sun, I think it is quite a difficult one for men and for women who actually date these guys, because probably not so much in the East, but definitely in the West, I would say that's the case, where there's like power and fame. They're so eager to have that, you know, there's just this ego thing. Look at me, and they definitely faking it, because whatever planet sits with your Rahu Ketu, there's an eclipse on it. It's not clear what's going on. The house that it's sitting in is eclipse as well, so be very careful about them. Really take your time to get to know these things. Otherwise, you know, Rahu's Sun can create scandals. It'll be somebody who promises you the world and will not deliver anything, ladies, so be careful. They will have fear of failure as well. Rahu, Mercury will be somebody who's got phobias about, will possibly have mental imbalance and mental health issues, and will be not very confident. Always compensating though, always compensating. You know, this is Rahu, always compensating about things to do with the house until they learn and they have substance. Once they work on the foundations and the indications of the planets that they're sitting with, on the houses they sit in, and the actual landlord of that, you know, so dispositor, then things will start flourishing. And both of them can give you so much wisdom, really. If you tap into them properly, you will be absolutely delighted with the results. So I hope this helps. This is for the people who ask, you know. So remember that I think there was a lady who was asking about 4th and 10th. So when you have Rahu in the 4th, you are pushing too much importance into the 4th house, which is good. But you're faking those feelings. You need to kind of emotionally grow, really work on the moon, really work, you know, on your mom, on being authentic with your feelings, your emotions, your connections, and not so much be concerned about career. And then the moment you work on that, then you get the balance, because careers will come easily to you anyway, because it's what you know. And if it's the opposite way around, you need to just like work more on if you've got Rahu in the 10th house, work on that, and you know, and then get the balance right. So I hope that helped, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you very much for watching.